Hello, hello. Welcome to another day, another little behind the scenes vlog. How's things? How are you enjoying these? Is there anything, I've got a big cup of tea here by the way. Is there anything that's coming up for you right now? What do you need help with? What do you want to know more about? Tell me in the comments, because I want this to be a conversation between you and I know that I'm just talking to a camera here, but I hope that wherever this is reaching you, it's connecting in some way. Today I want to share a milestone that happened a couple of weeks ago that I had been working on for ages, but I didn't even celebrate. And I don't know why that is. I got really busy. Things have been happening. I didn't anticipate how busy this time of year was going to be, which again, I'm always very grateful for. But it was one of those things that just slipped by. And so I'm not going to just allow that. I'm going to talk about it here and celebrate it with you. So I started my podcast in 2018, January, and since then I've published over 800 episodes, some interviews and also mini episodes as well. And this week, or rather a couple of weeks ago, I celebrated 250,000 downloads. And I know for some people with these big old podcasts that might not seem that many, but for me, doing it felt like a big number. 250,000 of anything to me is quite significant. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, not just like the stats and how good it makes me feel or anything like that, but what this podcast has done. Now, whether or not you want to start a podcast is totally irrelevant, really. What I want to talk about is how being yourself online and showing up and sharing stories is a very important part of becoming a business owner and becoming somebody that people know, like, and trust, all of those things. So I can share I've got a whole video series which is in my digital room. So if you go onto my freebies page, select the digital room, because there's about 10 videos in there about all the lessons that I've learned. I think I did that after 5 years, so fairly recently this year, but lessons that I've learned. But I want to touch on a few things today. The first was when I started the podcast, I had the idea probably 3 years before. And I had also been listening to podcasts since about 2009. And I used to take my iPad in my bag. And I don't know, I hadn't maybe figured out how to have an iPod, and do they even exist anymore, and have podcasts on there. I think I had them on my iPad, so I'd suss that. And then I'd just kind of have that in my bag. I mean, it was so heavy. I'd plug myself into it and I would listen. And I didn't do it for a while because it just didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me that I would have anything to say. It didn't occur to me that I'd be able to figure out the technology. I just wasn't thinking in that way. And then I had the idea in 2015, and that was at a time when I was pregnant for most of 2015, from January to October. And then I had my son in the October. And so that year was really a period of time when I was bedding in the next chapter of my life. So I was at home a lot. I was very sick in my pregnancy, and I was kind of doing bare minimal living. So I wasn't really going far or doing many exciting things. I was just in that sort of nesting period. And then once my son was born, he didn't sleep a lot. So we were spending a lot of time like pacing the streets and wandering around and trying to get him to sleep in the buggy, on me, in the bed, like all of the things. And when I had a boy, when I had a son, and like I felt very differently as well when I had a daughter, but I think whatever baby you have, it brings up some questions in yourself about who you are and where you go next and what life is all about. And sometimes those answers that come up, you're maybe not ready for, but your hormones will shove out those answers. But one of the things that kept coming up for me was how I was still ambitious and how I needed to be brave. Now, that bravery was probably actioned in a very minimal way. Like, oh, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to send an email. I'm going to put myself forward, even though, you know, I'm figuring out how to be a parent as well. And over time, as my children have got older, I have been able to become braver because I've had more space in my life. And I think nobody tells you how intense those early months, weeks, years are of parenthood. Anyway, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. So I was craving business conversations. I wasn't necessarily craving other sleep deprived parent conversations. You know, I figured out quite early, it made me feel even worse. Like, it was hard enough not sleeping myself, let alone hanging about with loads of people going, oh God, yeah, it is awful, the sleep deprivation. Then coming away thinking, yeah, I don't know, we've just talked about the same thing there. And so I was looking for inspiration. I was looking for stories. I was looking for people who had done what I wanted to do. But what I was seeking out was a lot of bro culture. I wasn't seeking it out, but that's what came to me. A lot of protein shakes, a lot of 4 a.m. gym sessions, a lot of quite masculine language, such as smashing it and all of that. You know what it was like. And I suddenly thought, there's a space here. There's a space for different conversations around success and what your version of it is. And I knew for a fact, certainly at that time, that success for me was not working 16-hour days. It was not never seeing my children. It was not about deprivation or hustling harder or like creepy selling, or I knew that it wasn't like that. And so I began to seek out people that I could chat with about this. And actually, some of those interviews sat on my website in the beginning. I did this interview series of like, what do you do? What are you all about? And promoting other small businesses. And then eventually in 2018, it became a podcast. So what has now happened since I grew this? Firstly, it is a platform that I have been dedicated and continue to be dedicated to growing. And I think in this time when you can be pulled in all sorts of different directions and there's a new trend and there's something else we should be doing, and should we be dancing in the street? Should we be TikToking? Should we be Snapchatting? What should we be doing? I find that very overwhelming. And so the fact that I spent time building this house essentially of my podcast has given me a focus. It's given me a place to put things. So if I have ideas, if I have things that I want to talk about, I know that they go in there. And one of the things that I've really realized with my business is if things feel too complicated, they feel less doable. And in a time when I need simplicity in my life, I need things to feel doable, they actually need to get done. I can't just go, do you know what? I'm just out of inspiration at the moment, so I'm not going to do anything for a month. That's not the case, you know. We're working parents. We have 2 children to support. We live in London. We have bills, all of that, like everybody. And so I really created that home for all of those ideas. And I also gave myself a task to really figure out what this was going to be about. And when that question at first was too hard, because it was like, well, I don't really know what it's going to be about because I haven't done it yet. And what if I change my mind or anything like that? So what I did instead was I asked myself a different question, which was, what is this podcast not about? What do you not want to be known for? And I didn't want to be a hustle harder bro. I didn't want to promote toxic positivity. I didn't want to promote 16-hour days. I wanted to, and then the more I kind of got into the detail of what I didn't want, the detail of what I did want started to come to the surface. Another thing that I asked myself, another question was, how can this feel really great? How can this feel really great and doable and actionable and in a state of flow? And that meant doing things in a way where I could easily do them. So I don't have a script where I sit down for 2 days and write this big long script and read it out. But I have found a formula that works for me where I know the key points that I want to cover, and then I cover them in that way. Things like batching has been really great for me. Things like putting all my ideas from my head into a system which is separate from my brain has really helped. Choosing people to be on the podcast that I really love talking to has helped, because therefore the conversation flows. And that's not to say you should just follow the people with the most amount of numbers, because that is not necessarily a sign for success. But what I have found this podcast to do for me is to really fit in with my mission, I guess, which is my online digital mission, which is, how can I be the person that I am in real life online? How can I make those two versions of myself this close? And this is a tricky conundrum sometimes for people, because as soon as we start to put something online or tick things off or make things formal, it's like writing a CV or a post or a link in bio or your about page or whatever it is. Suddenly there's that pressure to make things perfect, to make things desirable, to make things polished or professional or all of the above. And that's not to say you should throw out any old rubbish out there, but you have to be in there. And not just the polished, lovely photos, nice 3 paragraphs version, the you. The essence of you, the person that I'm going to have a lovely chat with, the person that I see in the street and we stop and we have a conversation, the person that you bring to different areas of your life, the person that other people who know you really well recognize. And I think sometimes we forget to bring the essence of ourselves because we're too busy trying to squeeze ourselves into some other mold. So when I qualified as a coach, for example, there were a lot of pashminas at the time in the coaching industry. It was very, and I know I'm wearing a cardigan today, but it was very polished. It was very buttoned up. There was some sort of scarf. There was a very polite earring, and it was all very polite. And of course, I can be polite too, but also I had other things I wanted to bring to the table. I wanted to bring jokes and energy and lightness and possibility and stories and fun analogies and all of the above. And yet, when I shot my first coaching headshots, they are very serious. They are very like, welcome to the clinic. Let's psychoanalyze you. And when somebody then meets me on Zoom or in person, they're like, oh, you're not that person. You look very serious in your photos. And this has been, certainly with the podcast, a question for me, a constant sort of grounding, anchoring statement to play with is, how can I be like me? How can I, and I'm going to say it, how can I bring my authentic self? And I ask you to do the same in your personal brand, especially if you are growing something that is reliant on you, especially if you work in an industry where there's lots of, I was going to say competition, but I don't mean it in the sort of aggressive like competition. Oh my goodness, somebody's going to take my work. But when there is a lot of you, how are you going to stand out? And standing out doesn't mean that you have to shove everybody to the side. Standing out is about how can you get the people who are going to really resonate with your message go, oh, that's the person that I need. That's the person that's going to help me. That's what standing out for me is about clarifying what that message is and who you are and how you show up, etc. If you want to go and listen to those lessons of the podcast, maybe you're looking at growing some kind of content, growing your numbers. Maybe you want to start a video series or an audio series or a blog series. You need some inspiration. Go to the digital room because there's loads and loads of free trainings in there. That's nickyraby.com/digital room. You may also want to buy my content workshop. So that is in my workshop section, nickyraby.com/workshops. Another thing you might want to do is your personal brand plan, which is really about working out what needs to be on your website. And that can be really, really tough sometimes because if you've got a designer or if you're doing it yourself or you're doing a hybrid of the two, you might say like, oh, I want it to feel like this, or I want the colors to look like this. But when they come to saying, okay, cool, what do you want to say about yourself or what do you want to offer? That's when there might be a stumbling block because it suddenly feels very personal. And that's how it should feel. It should feel personal. It should feel like you. It should feel like you can read it aloud without going, oh, cringe, this feels a bit odd. This feels a bit showy offy. I want you to have that connection with who that online version of yourself is. So if you want to check out that, do go over to my programs page. Again, I will leave the link down below. Or if you just want to do this stuff with me, working out where you're going next with your personal brand, what you're saying, what you're selling, what you're doing, what do you want to grow, what do you want to shrink, what's it all about? Loads of different options on my website, nickyraby.com/work with me. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. Do check out the links down below. Do subscribe, do rate, do review, leave a comment, all the good stuff. And I'll see you next time.